Let me go to Carol Roth now, who is joining us. She is the author of You Will Own Nothing and a former investment banker. I want to talk to her a little bit about Kamala Harris, but also about this so-called short, taking a short position against Donald J. Trump a day before the assassination attempt of 7/13. She's been looking into it for us. Carol, welcome.
Hi, Glenn. Have you aged 12 years in the last 10 days like I have?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I think we're going to age another 40 years by the end of the summer.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, is this true or not, the Trump media option story?
So this was one of the biggest stories going around social media, and certainly was very odd, right? The day before he gets assassinated, there is this big set of options contracts betting against the stock, saying that they were betting that the stock was going to fall massively, millions and millions of contracts. And of course, everybody's tying, what does this mean? What does this mean? So this is what I found based on publicly available information. So registered investment advisor called Austin Private Wealth, as you mentioned, they have to file what's called a 13F filing. This is a disclosure filing that's required quarterly from any investment manager that has more than $100 million in assets under management. And basically, it lists all of their equity holdings, which usually includes equity-related options and other ETFs and stocks and the like at the end of every quarter. And since after the quarter ends, it takes a little bit of time to gather the data. That's usually filed within a few weeks after the end of the quarter. So the filing for Austin Wealth as of the end of June was made on July 12th. So people who sort of think that this was reflective of something that happened on July 12th didn't really appreciate that this was an end of June report that was filed on July 12th. So that sort of set off the first wave of conspiracies. The second thing, very unfortunate, is that they had a third-party vendor, apparently, according to their press release, that had erroneously misstated their positions. And that meant that for the Trump Media Group, they had put, instead of putting 12 contracts, which represented 1,200 shares, because each contract is 100 share, it showed that they had 12 million share equivalents. So, that sounds a little sketchy. Why would they do that? But they did that on every single call and put option that they had listed. So it was, for NVIDIA, they had 370 million shares listed, Bank of America, 110 million shares. So this was a clear error across the board. And because I don't believe anything, I went back and I checked all of the previous filings. And in all of the previous filings, they had a normalized number of contracts being shown. So it was clear this was a mistake and it was an outlier. So when you put these two things together and it looks like there's so many shares and it's done at a time period that looks like it was the Friday before the assassination attempt, but really that was just the filing date, it got very blown out of proportion, and they recognized their error and they did a new filing that they had to amend with the SEC, and this is on July 16th. And for anybody who's super nerdy and likes to go through and look at filings, this is all available on the SEC's site EDGAR, which allows you to find all the filings, the publicly available filings that are made by companies. So it's an unfortunate mistake in terms of timing and sort of the scope of the mistake that was made.
Okay. Let me take the next one, and that is CrowdStrike.
Yes.
There was a major outage this weekend, and they say it was just a release of new software, and it was just an error that nobody caught. How does that happen and put the United States? I mean, there were like 12 planes flying in the sky because of this, and Europe was hit even harder than we were.
Yeah, this is, I've talked about Nassim Taleb before in previous books and things like that, and he's the author and sort of coiner of the phrase, the black swan in wider use.
Right.
And they talk about these systemic risks that are being brought on by the fact that we're all so interconnected, and technology is really exacerbating the systemic risk. In fact, it's one of the reasons I argued in You Will Own Nothing that a central bank digital currency, on top of all the other reasons, made no sense, because it increases that idea that you could have this massive one-off systemic risk instead of everything being decentralized and having maybe more frequent but smaller risks. So when you have a firm that is tied into basically every major company on the planet and is impacting how their infrastructure runs, you're increasing the ability to have these huge systemic risks. Now, how can this happen? Is it intentional? Is it a test run? Is it just incompetence? Unfortunately, I tend to think that we are in the era of incompetence. And, that is in many ways just as bad. And we've seen in all of these different areas of our life these sort of lackadaisical policies, and the fact that people are no longer in school taught, merit and excellence and the value of their name and their work, and they just want to be, given things based on equity, and because I showed up, you do get these worse outcomes. And so, how could it happen? I mean, we all sit there and go, yeah, wouldn't you test for these things? But that's sort of the reality we're living in. And I think it really should highlight and put a giant red neon sign on the fact that we shouldn't all be on these same systems. There should be some level of decentralization. There should at least be a secondary fail-safe, because, this is something that was massive and was able to be brought back up in short order. But the next time that may not be the case. And this is the kind of stuff you and I have been talking about in terms of preparation, because, what if you didn't have ATM access for multiple days? What if you didn't have access to a pharmacy that couldn't get you your medication on time because, they couldn't access their records? I mean, there's so many things now that are all completely reliant on technology, which is great when it works 99% of the time, and when it doesn't work, it can be a disaster.
So quickly, I just want to touch on Jamie Dimon being thrown around. What a surprise that is. When I saw him at Davos, and he was like, we should take a second look at Donald Trump. I don't think he's that bad of a guy. I thought he wants to be Treasury Secretary. But I also saw a story that Donald Trump is friends with Larry Fink from BlackRock and would consider that. I don't believe that. What have you heard?
Yes, I saw that headline as well, and I almost fell over. The Jamie Dimon versus Larry Fink, I'm taking Jamie Dimon every single day. You're 24/7, 365, every single time. Jamie himself has been positioning to get out of JPMorgan for the first time ever. He said that, it's no longer I'm going to be here for the next 5 years. It's, I'm looking for a successor. One of the things that you may or may not be aware of, and this happened with Gary Cohn in the last administration, is that if you go into an administration, they make you sell all of your shares, which means you don't have to, at that point, pay the capital gains taxes on them. So it's a really great way if you've got a lot of stock to get a windfall. So, and given the fact that Jamie Dimon is plugged in with all of these people and knows what's going on, I think that that's one to watch for. Larry Fink, I think we all need to raise our voices if that sounds like it's becoming something that's going to happen.
Yeah,
this is why I always tell you that for people who say, should I get out of the stock market? You have to remember, these guys are always taking care of their own. If we're talking about Jamie Dimon in charge of things, what do you think his number one priority is going to be? Wall Street.
Right. So let me switch now to Kamala Harris. Just based on the insane things she was for when she was a senator and running, what happens to the economy under Kamala Harris?
Yeah, this is very scary. I mean, we know that Kamala doesn't have a lot of economic sense. We know she likes Venn diagrams, but that's about it.
And yellow school buses.
Yes, and yellow school buses. So that's sort of the extent of her economic knowledge. And what's scary about that is it makes her more susceptible to the bad actors. We already know that Biden was not the one who was running the last administration. I mean, that's super clear to everyone. He was positioned as a moderate, and he was the most destructive president economically and otherwise than we have seen in a lifetime. So now you have the same people who are pulling the puppet strings, and now they have Kamala Harris, who has, and I know that Justin Haskins, your co-authors, brought this up before, she has a very checkered history. She was, I think a lot of people forget this, she was one of the Senate sponsors, co-sponsors of the original Green New Deal. So she put her
which was
up
insane.
There with, yeah, I don't think people remember because the Biden version's insane too, but this was like, $100 trillion insane, and that was their estimate. So, this is somebody who is in the same league as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren when they're talking about policy. We have her on video saying things like, I don't think there should be any private health care. And if you go back to being somebody who wanted to step into that co-sponsorship, most of the senators did not want anything to do with that, but there were a handful that did. She stepped forward. And if you start going through that, I mean, it's a socialization of everything. It's not only just completely killing energy policy, but it's a socialization of labor and wages and, even more so of college and, all of these different government handouts and, basic income programs. So I think that people really need to be doubled down on, this is not only an extension of the Biden administration terrible policies because the same people are pulling the strings, but she's also aligned with every kooky socialist on the planet. And this isn't a person with a lot of political clout and fortitude that says, no, I came from, this area, I ran a business, I'm strong in this, and right. I know. I mean, do you think she has any idea what monetary policy is? I can't imagine she does, and that makes her extra dangerous.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Carol. Thanks for all of the homework that you've done over the weekend to prepare for this segment. I appreciate it. Carol Roth, you can follow her at carolroth.com/news. And you can get her updates on stories and the economy and also her book, You Will Own Nothing. She's a former investment banker, carolroth.com.